Obrizum not only classifies itself as an adaptive learning provider, but also as a data and analytics company. For too long, learning teams within enterprise organizations have historically been seen as the cost center. Unfortunately, they found it very difficult to generate the right data to not only be able to prove the effectiveness of their training courses, but importantly, start to prove an ROI and be aligned to strategic decision outcomes. Obrizum's mission is to be the world leader in the measurement of human training within digital environments. However, to do that, we have to fundamentally change the way that we build courses. The reason for that is that the way courses are created today make it very difficult and close to impossible to measure more data other than completion and score. It's very hard to identify not only how effective training courses are, how well content is performing, whether those courses that you have created have an impact on your learners, but actually what is the strategic outcome to the organization, and ultimately what is the ROI of your training course. The first of these problems is the way in which content has traditionally been created. If you look across the board, across the largest enterprises, everyone will likely be creating content within SCORM packages. SCORM content has existed since the 2000s because it makes it easy to create content in a standardized way that aligns to different LMSs. However, the problem with that is that SCORM is created to be a large package of content. In its fundamental right, that makes it impossible to be personalized, it makes it impossible for the content to sit independently, and therefore it's very difficult to identify how your learners are engaging with individual pieces of content. So within Obrizum, we chose to move away from SCORM and focus on bite-sized pieces of content or content nodes. What this means is that learners will consume small pieces, shorter form pieces of content independently within the course, where Obrizum is constantly able to measure the data of that learner's engagement, how well your learners are actually engaging with your content, and how effective individual pieces of content are at training that learner on different topics. This allows you to have constant feedback on your courses and use that feedback loop to make constant updates to your courses, allowing them to be as effective as possible. The second problem is that traditional digital courses use multiple choice questions as the de facto assessment. The problem with those is that they typically only look to see whether a learner has answered a question correctly or incorrectly. It is difficult to see why the learner answered the question in the way they did. Were they sure of their answer? Did they guess? Did they try to cheat? Were they even engaged with the learning? And therefore, it's very difficult to identify how effective that training course and those assessments have been. Therefore, within Obrizum, we chose to add a layer of metacognition within our assessments. What that means is now we're not only looking at a learner's accuracy, but how confident they are when they're answering those questions, what their self-awareness is, how engaged they are when they're answering those questions, and importantly, whether they're trying to guess their way through that course. That allows us to identify thousands of data points on every single individual learner to be able to see their strengths, their weaknesses, how sure they are of their answers, whether they're confident, overconfident, and importantly, underconfident, to be able to allow your organization to make strategic decisions. You can then use that data to determine targeted remediation. So are your learners actually improving from your training course? Do we need to improve the content? Are we identifying real gaps within our workforce? And is the digital course improving that? If not, what should we use as targeted remediation? Should we move towards a coaching aspect, mentoring, peer-to-peer learning, but ultimately giving you the power to take learning more into a strategic direction, start to prove the effectiveness of training courses, and ultimately align an ROI to your projects?